Japan appears to be opening a new front with Xi Jinping, as Beijing claims it has caught Japanese surveillance planes close to Taiwan. China says it has caught Japan red-handed, accusing Japanese aircraft of snooping on Xi's navy near Taiwan. Beijing reports that 2 Japanese reconnaissance aircraft were flying near Taiwan as Tokyo and Manila gear up for sensitive maritime border talks. With China enraged, are Tokyo and Manila at the risk of being dragged into any future Taiwan war? According to Chinese authorities, Japanese surveillance aircraft were detected operating near Taiwan on June 9, adding a fresh layer of tension to already crowded skies. At least 2 fixed-wing Japanese planes were spotted southeast of Taiwan, flying in areas where Chinese maritime patrols were underway. The aircraft appeared to belong to Japan's Coast Guard and were picked up by Chinese forces while they were conducting a special maritime law enforcement patrol. These developments were highlighted in regional media reports on June 10, citing detailed accounts and imagery from Chinese state outlets. Chinese sources say the first aircraft was detected at 6:15 a.m. local time and identified by its distinct tilted tail assembly, a feature associated with certain Japanese surveillance types. A second plane, bearing what were described as the signature markings of the Japan Coast Guard, was allegedly spotted later at 2:11 p.m. the same day. Both aircraft were reported to be medium or small-sized crewed electronic reconnaissance platforms, designed to monitor ships, signals, and activity at sea. A Chinese military expert claimed the planes were sent to snoop around, suggesting their mission was to closely observe Chinese vessels' operations and collect intelligence. At the same time, China's own patrol in the area was described as part of a special maritime law enforcement operation, not just a routine presence. This mission reportedly began on June 6 in waters east of Taiwan and concluded on June 11, marking several days of continuous Chinese activity off the island's eastern flank. Chinese media argued the patrol was necessary in light of ongoing maritime border talks between Japan and the Philippines, implying Beijing wanted to signal its own claims and resolve. Beijing has already lodged a strong protest over those Japan-Philippines talks, accusing the 2 U.S. allies of ganging up to challenge China's position in the region. Since the talks resumed, China has visibly ramped up patrols east of Taiwan, reinforcing the message that it will not sit back while its neighbors coordinate maritime strategies. Amid simmering tensions in the South China Sea, China and the Philippines are now locked in an escalating war of words. China strongly condemned remarks made by the Philippines defense chief during the recent Shangri-La summit in Singapore. Beijing accused Gilberto Teodoro Jr. of deliberately undermining bilateral relations between China and the Philippines. The defense secretary is known to vilify Beijing, claimed a spokesperson from China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. China further urged Manila to either sack its defense chief or take corrective action against him. The sharp rebuttal from Beijing came after Teodoro claimed the Philippines faces a growing threat from China. The Manila defense chief also dismissed Chinese assistance, including fertilizer and fuel support provided to the Philippines.
Japan and the Philippines, bypassing China, unilaterally initiated so-called maritime boundary delimitation negotiations, which seriously violate international law, including the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea and the basic norms of international relations, and severely infringe upon China's maritime rights and interests. China will never allow this. Both sides of the Taiwan Strait belong to one China. Safeguarding national territorial sovereignty and maritime rights and interests is the common responsibility of all Chinese people on both sides of the strait. The DPP authorities, in pursuit of their own political gains, have not hesitated to betray the overall interests of the Chinese nation, showing utter disregard for their roots and having no bottom line. This once again exposes that the Taiwan independence forces have completely lost their national stance and have become utter national traitors, which will inevitably be spurned by compatriots on both sides of the Taiwan Strait and subject to historical reckoning. This Philippine defense minister has repeatedly made fallacious statements about China. His latest remarks, which you just mentioned, once again demonstrate that he completely disregards the well-being of the Filipino people, has absolutely no sense of gratitude, and only pursues personal gain. He even goes so far as to use livelihood issues for political grandstanding, seriously damaging China-Philippines relations and mutual trust, and is completely contrary to the interests of the Philippine nation and people. The Philippines should seriously reflect on this. If such a person is allowed to act with impunity, How can China continue to provide the Philippines with supplies and assistance? Who ultimately pays the bill? Whose interests are being harmed? Philippine leaders have repeatedly stated their willingness to properly handle differences with China and promote the easing of bilateral relations. We hope the Philippines will be consistent in word and deed, strictly restrain the words and actions of its officials, and not allow a few clowns to repeatedly undermine efforts to stabilize bilateral relations. The issue of Taiwan's external relations should be handled in accordance with the One China principle. Hyping up external threats to justify military buildup and preparedness is a common tactic of Japanese militarism. International documents such as the Potsdam Declaration clearly stipulate that Japan must completely disarm and cannot maintain industries capable of rearming itself. This is Japan's international legal obligation. However, Japan's lifting of the ban on the export of lethal weapons, strengthening of its military industry and accelerated shift in its security policy towards an offensive posture bear a striking resemblance to the pre-World War II militaristic preparations for war. The lessons of appeasement and tolerance of militarism in history are painful. The warning is still fresh. Once the Pandora's box of militarism is opened, no one can remain unscathed. Ultimately, it will breed a tiger that will eventually turn on them.
For countries like the Philippines, though, which is under severe threat, territory-wise and politically too by China, we have no choice but really to be resilient and to stand up against Chinese aggression. The commitment of the United States becomes more solid when more actors come to, at least in the deterrence phase, come in, because there is a common threat. So no matter how they sugarcoat their assistance to us, it doesn't cut the mustard, so to speak, because I mean the actual demonstration of good faith in a long-term and impactful basis is absent. It's actually guileful. So it's best, to let things evolve as they are. Philippines now is in a highly toxic and highly charged political environment. So it's best for me, for my duty to my country, to stick with what I'm doing.
The defense chief's remarks appear to differ significantly from the approach taken by Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. According to reports, the Philippine president has indicated he remains open to resuming discussions with Beijing. The proposed negotiations would reportedly focus on developing natural gas resources in the South China Sea. This heated exchange also comes as Japan and the Philippines agreed to launch maritime boundary discussions. China has responded to Japan-Philippines boundary talks with expanded sea patrols, increasing the presence of maritime security vessels to assert its claims and to signal displeasure at discussions it views as encroaching on waters Beijing considers linked to Taiwan. Chinese Coast Guard vessels carried out patrols in waters east of Taiwan on June 1st, moving through strategic sea lanes and conducting visible operations intended to deter rival activity and monitor approaches to the island. The development was reported by the South China Morning Post on June 1st, which cited official and open-source tracking that documented the uptick in Chinese maritime movements around the sensitive area. China launched the countermove after Japan and the Philippines began discussing waters east of Taiwan, treating those negotiations as a challenge to Beijing's asserted maritime rights and responding with patrols and warnings to reassert control. Beijing views Taiwan as part of China and therefore lays claim to the waters around the territory, a stance that underpins Chinese maritime activity and shapes its responses to any foreign presence or bilateral deals in the region. Speculation of an impending Taiwan invasion has increased since Trump's recent trip to China, with analysts warning that high-profile diplomatic engagements and public rhetoric can feed uncertainty and accelerate precautionary military posturing across the Taiwan Strait. Xi Jinping openly warned the US against interfering over Taiwan, cautioning that outside intervention risks sparking conflict and urging Washington to respect what Beijing describes as its core interests and sovereign claims. The spokesperson of China's Coast Guard said, and I quote, "This is a necessary action taken in response to Japan and the Philippines' unilateral announcement of the launch of maritime boundary delimitation negotiations in waters east of China's Taiwan Island, which seriously infringes upon China's territorial sovereignty and maritime rights and interests. We urge Japan and the Philippines to immediately cease all illegal actions that infringe upon China's sovereignty and rights." Unquote. China said it would continue to strengthen control over relevant waters, pledging to increase patrols, enforcement activities, and maritime presence to assert its claims and deter what it views as unauthorized foreign actions. Beijing added that it would safeguard territorial sovereignty and maritime rights, vowing to use diplomatic, legal, and operational measures to protect what it describes as core national interests and to resist any attempts to undermine its jurisdiction at sea. Japan and the Philippines agreed to delimit the maritime boundary of their exclusive economic zones and continental shelf, a diplomatic step intended to clarify jurisdiction over resources, navigation rights, and maritime responsibilities in a strategically sensitive area near Taiwan. Beijing had lodged protests with Tokyo and Manila and condemned the talks as illegal and void, denouncing the bilateral negotiations as a violation of China's claimed rights and warning that such moves would provoke a firm response to defend its maritime assertions.